Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Now, every time I start the show, for the last couple of weeks, I've had that criticism that Tom had of my opening of the show in my head. And so I'm like, G'ing myself up, and then I'm like aware of the way that my face changes, and that makes me laugh, and then I'm having this whole like dialogue in my head before I hit go on the show, and it's very distressing. Thanks, Tom.
Criticism? I never criticized it. I just think it's funny.
And the observation being that I look dour and you know, bags under the eyes, a real Graham Norton over here, looking like shit before the show, hating the world, and then lights come on, you know, so lights, camera, action, and then all of a sudden I'm Happy George. And now I realize...
And creative feedback. It's not criticism.
Sure, you're right. It's constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism.
The kind of critique that one might receive in a review in the paper from theatrepeople.com or something like that.
Is theatrepeople.com the paper?
It's online paper of the future, mate.
Mm.
Where one can pay for your show to be reviewed if you are a person who does shows. It's this content's getting increasingly niche as I keep talking, so let's move on. We're a show about newsy type stuff and things, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Today's show brought to you by Feet on the Ground 2020 Merlot. They have sent us cease and desist before I actually mention them.
A cease and desist to mention them, or for you to just even drink them?
Yeah, it's really just a legal request to not possess, transfer, or purchase their wines, let alone drink them on air. So I can confirm those delicious drop, and it is funding my the existential terror at returning to the work week. As you know, we record on Sunday afternoons, so.
It's an existential terror.
All right. It's good for, 70-ish minutes just to pretend that, we're not going back to work.
Yeah, that's been my way of coping, is to pretend the thing is not happening and drink. So,
and the occasional just screaming for no reason. Like, I mean, you get some looks, especially if you're, the random moment that you've decided just to scream into the proverbial void was, I don't know, down the shops.
Yeah.
But it's a good coping mechanism.
Look, it generally works except for when you're down the Woolies, then people start, giving you some sideways glances as a rule. But
unless you come to Woolworths Balaclava, where there are people that definitely scream into the void apropos of nothing anyway.
Yeah, fun. That is true. As I think, Adam, you and I have spoken about off air quite a lot, that particular supermarket it's like it's the end of days all the time. Like, even before, the pandemic and panic buying toilet paper and all that sort of stuff, it's like it's a supermarket just as the reports of maybe strange people are biting people in the streets have kind of just started to surface. So everyone's rushing to get supplies to hunker down and all that. So you always go in there and the canned goods are everywhere and the lights are always flickering just that little bit, and everyone's rushing around and you just feel
Jenny's
unsafe.
Running past with the shopping and the kids just in a real hurry. She's got to get in and out there with the 10 rolls of toilet paper. It's funny because it actually was good practice and they prepared them for the pandemic in real life. But look, we're a show about news type stuff and things. One of the stories this week is about our Deputy Prime Minister,
our fearless leader, Michael McCormack.
If you think you're going to have a bad week, George, if you're dreading this coming work week, have a feel, have a heart, share a moment, whatever the expression is.
I will not have a feel of Michael McCormack. Thank you very much.
Have a feel for Michael McCormack. Yes.
I don't think anyone has attempted to use a phrase like "have" or "cop a feel" in a wholesome kind of way, as an empathetic sort of way. It's Adam, cop a feel, Adam. Have some respect. Did I say that?
I don't know. I mean, look,
you said have a feel, and now I'm just trying to dig your grave for you.
Okay, Michael McCormack's going to dig his own grave.
For those who don't know, leader of the Nationals Party here in Australia, and thus the Deputy Prime Minister, Michael McCormack, and all around, Deputy Prime Minister and noted potato Michael McCormack is staring down talk of a challenge on his leadership in the party room meeting tomorrow morning, allegedly Monday. What is today? The 20th? So Monday the 21st.
Yeah.
Staring down talk of a leadership challenge on tomorrow, saying there is, quote, no reason for the Nationals party room not to be behind him, which is the sort of thing that someone would say if there was some reason for his colleagues not to be behind him.
The very fact you're being asked the question might imply that there are some colleagues that are not, in fact, behind him.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because the journalists must know who these people are. Obviously, some people in the Nationals party room are backgrounding on Michael McCormack, and that's why it's in the news. So it'd be an interesting situation to be like, hey, Michael McCormack, what's up with the leadership challenge against you? And for him to be like, no, and you'd be like, well, there is, because I talked to them. So
I spoke to Barnaby.
I spoke to Barnaby just now, and he was talking a lot of shit.
Yeah, and he's frothing for a challenge.
And it's funny because over the last 3 weeks, we've just been like, wouldn't it be funny if Barnaby took the leadership back again?
Yeah.
Like the lol jokes, that would be hilarious.
Well, it's only because of the spectacular weapons grade ineptitude that Michael McCormack happens to make a display of every time he opens his mouth. And the thought comes to you that wouldn't it be, it's just a bunch of people sitting around the party room just going, man, is Michael McCormack a fucking Milwaukee circular saw? Because he is just a power tool. He is just... Mate, Michael, I don't know if it's occurred to you guys. I think Michael's just a fucking idiot.
Oh my God.
I don't know if you guys know about this. They're like, you know what? Yes,
yeah.
Thank you for saying something. But yes, he is. Yeah, he's a real dum-dum, isn't he? He's like a dumb as a box of hair. What are we doing with this guy?
He's currently our acting prime minister, right? Because to my knowledge, Scott Morrison is still overseas after his G7 visit. I think he's got some other shit to get done over there.
He's back at the lodge as of today, from what I heard.
Scott Morrison? Yeah. Oh, he's back now? Oh, yeah, okay, cool.
In isolation. He has sort of staring, hands on the glass, staring out, wondering as Hello's Darkness, my old friend, plays as it slowly pans out from the lodge.
If only we'd invested in Pfizer way back when, I wouldn't have to be doing this, he's wondering.
Yes.
No, he's not. He doesn't give a fuck.
I was just going to say,
we'll get to that.
Michael McCormack is the acting prime minister in the same way that Scott Morrison, the actual prime minister, is just acting like a prime minister. They're not actually doing anything. They just swan around as though they are the prime minister, and we just take it for fact. So
yeah, but during this period of Michael McCormack being the acting PM while Scott Morrison's been overseas, he's had some corkers. I think we talked about some of them last week, but I think during this past week, I don't think we've talked about it that much. For a while now, there's been the issue of a mouse plague in New South Wales. Rural New South Wales, a lot of farmers and just people out in rural areas have been inundated with absurd amounts of mice that are eating their crops and their food, and just some of the footage is actually terrifying. It's like when enough mice just seem like they're a liquid and are just flooding through places. Yeah, it's really, quite terrifying.
Really nasty. There was a piece of footage that I saw where this guy was had a fish and was sort of, I don't know, it's hard to describe. He was sort of had the fish's mouth open, some big cod or something, and he's running it through some water backwards, and mice, rats are popping out of its mouth. He must have ingested half a dozen fucking rats. I was just like, oh my God, what the fuck is that? What is going on out there right now?
That's terrifying.
Anyway,
so there's been a lot of big deals going on. It's how to deal with that problem, because they're all here's how we could exterminate the rats or mice. Sorry, with the mice with poisons and all that sort of stuff. Of course, that's gotten people the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, up in arms, and I know you should relocate the mice. All this sort of stuff.
Okay,
and Michael McCormack being the leader.
Pied Piper. This way, children, please, after me.
So Michael McCormack being the acting PM during this period, and also being the head of the Nationals Party, which is obviously more predominantly rural seats and electorates and all that sort of stuff. They're the People for Regional Australia.
He's got to play to the base, right? He's got to play to his base, right?
He played to the base hard.
He is Megan Trainor, because he is all about that base.
Oh yes, he is he was very much against, angry at Peter for saying like, "Oh, don't kill the mice, relocate them." And he suggested on the floor of Parliament that maybe the mice should be relocated to their inner city lefty apartments where they can nip at their feet and eat their food. And I was like, "Oh man, Michael, you're currently the acting PM of the whole country, right?"
Acting PM, but actual fucking idiot.
Yes.
So this is the actual quote. We have Peter coming out, and I didn't hear the member for Melbourne, which is Greens leader Adam Bant, disendorsing them, saying the poor little curious creatures, the mice, should be rehomed. I agree that they should be rehomed into their inner city apartments so they can nibble away at their food and their feet at night and scratch their children at night.
Oh my God.
This is a disgrace by Peter.
It's so funny to bring this up on the floor of Parliament because it's like, as far as I'm aware, Peter has no political constituency whatsoever. Like, basically everyone with a brain regards them as a more or less vaguely kind of extreme organization that doesn't represent the majority of people.
Thing, right? They're not even really Australian.
It's not. It is not a. There were no Penny Wong wasn't saying we should relocate the mice. No politician has advocated this as a point of view, and yet Michael McCormack saw fit to jump on the floor of Parliament and have a go at the others. At the others for some. I don't just. Yeah, he's just slapping that bass. He's just for it's like he's a band member of that what's that band that old white men like is in that film?
Floyd or something.
No.
Spinal Tap?
Yes.
What are you talking about? A band that old people really like that was in a movie?
Rush.
Rush.
It's it's like they're all band members of Rush because they really love slapping the bass.
But
it was
interesting.
It's a long way to get there, but
we've talked about, as George, I think you've talked about in previous weeks, where members of the Liberal Party or the Coalition or just sort of right wing media and politics just in general seem to just the only kind of grounds that they can pull up any make any sort of popularity for themselves is just to turn any issue into a culture war. So for him to then just turn this into, oh well, it's inner city lefty hippies who are wanting to save the mice. And fuel those tensions between rural Australians and city dwellers and stuff like that is just hilariously galling. It's the coffee thing all over again, which I think we talked about previously.
Yeah, Michael McCormack will make a big deal of latte sipping inner city people, and then there was some great article on The Shovel where it was just a collage of Michael McCormack drinking lattes with various political heavyweights and stakeholders.
Yeah, and also, do you think people out in rural areas don't drink coffee?
No, mate.
There are cafes in regional towns, man.
Black coffee, black like the coal that I dig out of the fucking ground.
Yeah, is it the actual fact they're lattes that's the problem, actually, in that instance? Is it the warming of milk adding it to the coffee that makes
cappuccinos are absolutely fine. If you just get a cappuccino on a mug, that's cool. That's
shot macchiato, totally fine. No, it's just
everyone loves chocolate, so honestly, mochaccino, perfect.
Honestly, Tom, I'm ashamed to say it's mainly just because I'm lactose intolerant. I'm just jealous. A latte seems like a delightful drink.
Just sounds amazing. And their milked almonds just aren't the same. I mean, how do they get the milk out of there? It's not even a cow.
I don't see any tits on it.
Milk it. Just milk the almond.
Almond juice.
So that speech, it came back to. I remembered another speech by the previous Nationals leader, who of course is the one waiting in the wings, and Barnaby Joyce, who. And this is the thing. This is where it gets real weird.
Sorry, before you go on. When you said waiting in the wings, I just imagined Barnaby Joyce with the Phantom of the Opera mask, just with a cape, hanging out waiting in the wings, waiting for his time to strike.
He pretty much has been that since getting ousted.
The music of the night.
Of regional Australia. So the Barnaby's speech that was all about the carp, right? And Barnaby noted for saying and making up. Barnaby has done the same thing. Any Nationals leader has to play to that regional base. They'll throw out some stupid speech in Parliament to tick off some, to keep some backbenchers happy and to keep some rural voters happy. But what they're saying in actual fact is complete it's completely ludicrous normally.
Yeah.
Barnaby is obviously the person that will probably is the obvious candidate, and I think there's a couple of papers from the backgrounding it's been happening have reported that he probably does have the numbers. I guess we'll find out tomorrow.
Well, here's the thing: from a strategic point of view, you don't generally back around to the papers unless you're trying to field the numbers, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have the numbers and everyone's like knows that they're all good, you know, in terms of the numbers, and they'll just wait for the vote and they'll wait for the time to strike. The reason that you back round to the papers is that you're trying to whip the votes, and there's a few people that are still sitting on the fence and you know haven't decided one way or the other, and they want to gauge public opinion. That way, you go to the press. Yes, you give your opponent a bit of advance warning, but you're also like, if the media's on your side, then you might be able to sway some people that are still sort of undecided, right? Like if you had it in the bag, we wouldn't even know about it. It would just happen one day.
The thing that I can't wrap my head around is that you're not happy with McCormack because he says dumb shit. So your solution to the deputy PM saying dumb shit is to put the other guy that says dumb shit.
Motherfucking yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker Joyce is going to be the guy who you're going to replace him with.
Mud-sucking, dwelling, carp, something, Barnaby Joyce.
Remember when he tried to have Johnny Depp's dogs murdered for violating the Biosecurity Act?
Yeah, the war on terrier.
The guy looks there.
War on terrier. I forgot about that.
A bloated tomato, just like a sweaty, bloated tomato.
Yeah, he's a smashed beetroot.
Mate. Don't trust this white, pasty, doughy, bloated, red-faced, middle-aged, dumb cunt to run your affairs. Trust this bloated, sweaty, doughy, white, red-faced, middle-aged, dumb cunt to run your affairs instead. It'll be a total sea change.
Not to mention the guy that probably had a large part
single-handedly ruined the Murray-Darling Basin.
The guy who's meant to be for regional Australia and regional Victoria, single-handedly like fucking the plan to save one of the most important river systems in the country.
Well, we do know for a fact, based on the last scandal that we had of Barnaby Joyce that led to his ousting, he is the world's greatest lover. So naturally he would fuck the absolute shit out of the Murray-Darling Basin.
I don't know. I'm just overwhelmed by rural Australia's ability to like see some, you know, rosy-faced twat wearing an Akubra and just be like, oh yeah, that's the guy for me. What a fucking excellent bloke. Meanwhile, the Liberals must be like standing back in horror, just like looking through the glass, being like, you guys, the top end of town, the guys who donate all their money to us, they're in the cities. These are the people that we rely on. Like, I know you guys in your base are all, you know, out in the country and like want to fight the culture war on any dumb, you know, fucking issue. But like, the banks who donate to us are based in the cities. Like, you guys really need to slow your fucking roll on this. Like, yeah,
it's mind blowing. And then, of course, well, George, I think you said this earlier today that there was a theory floating around that there might be a secret third option that might crop up. Where
it was Sean McAuliffe.
Sean McAuliffe
said this because like, you know, the early articles sort of been around about like a potential leadership spill and saying, because, you know, for just some numbers on like the inner workings of the National Party room, there are 21 members. So apparently a potential challenger needs at least 11 votes to take the leadership, right? And there's been sort of reports as to how many votes maybe that Barnaby Joyce would get. The numbers they have here is like 7 to 8 firm votes. So that's why, as George said earlier, like whipping up support is probably a large point of this. But when people look at these sort of leadership spills, they go, well, hang on, well, who else, if people don't like Michael McCormack, but also if they don't want Barnaby back, who else is kind of in a position to do this? And some people are thinking maybe David Littleproud, who we've talked about a bit before. And Sean McAuliffe, Australian comedian, TV show host, and just all-around legend, he pointed out something on Twitter, which was just maybe Barnaby doesn't realise he's being unwittingly used to like usher in a David Littleproud leadership, like how when Scott Morrison got in as PM in the last spill that we had, the only reason he kind of got in was because people strategically pitted the worst choice ever of Peter Dutton against someone else. It was Julie when they were looking at a Dutton v Julie Bishop, that Dutton would probably win because misogyny. But if it came down to Julie Bishop and Scott Morrison, Julie Bishop would win. So they intentionally matched up these things just to get someone who they didn't hate to win.
I love this,
my enemy is my friend.
Yes, this this poverty of fucking expectations that we have of these people is just like the least fucked up candidate. Like, no, okay. You know, this, no, we can't let Peter Dutton win because he's literally Voldemort. But Julie Bishop's got a vagina. It's like, at no point does the criteria rest on like, who is the most experienced person for this job? Who is the best policy expertise in this area? It's like, at no point do any of these considerations enter into it. It's just like, which cunt do we fucking hate the least? This is Australian politics.
Is Little Proud in the lower house or the upper house?
I would
assume
he'd have to be in the lower house, wouldn't he?
I don't think he is, which is interesting. David Little Proud. Everyone just do some padding music.
So he's currently the
deputy
leader, Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management, House of Representatives. Yeah, he'd have to be in the House of Representatives.
He's actually he's the Liberal National Party of Queensland. So he's not in like the Nationals, in like he's in a subset of Nationals.
Okay, right. Well, yeah, I'm not fully across like the positions and rankings of that sort of stuff. That was just like a theory that I saw thrown around. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that could be interesting. Because do they really want Barnaby back?
It's funny because there's the Nationals and there's the Liberal National Party of Queensland.
Neglected to mention the whole thing about Barnaby like cheating on his wife and having a child with one of his staffers, which was the main reason that he got, booted in the first place. Like this guy he is like riddled with scandals. It is not the person that you want to be taking over. So it may just be that you're right, Tom. Like all of a sudden we've been seeing a lot of David Littleproud and the national media spruiking, this or that policy. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being like ScoMo style, where they're trying to, they vote for an empty chair, or they'll vote for, it's Malcolm Turnbull's way of, screwing over Peter Dutton is that he gets ScoMo installed, he gets his guy installed instead. It could be that sort of situation. Either way, though, I would not expect the rhetoric from the Nationals to ease up at any point. It does seem to be one of those, having finished Ezra Klein's Why We're So Polarized, it definitely seems like one of those sort of self-fulfilling cycles. Like, this is just a problem that's going to get worse, and it's not going to get better, and that is just what it is.
And can you just imagine that first day back in Parliament House if like Barnaby Joyce came back and it's just like, all right, so I'm here, Deputy PM again, eh? He's like, hey, Barnaby,
great to see you, Barnaby.
How's the last few years been with the new Mrs. Fuck?
Surely,
what do we talk about?
Surely though,
how's the family? And he goes, which one?
Surely though, after the whole sex scandals and the culture wars of Parliament House, where there's been found to be serious problems with the way people conduct themselves in Parliament. Surely, after all that, with an election coming up at the end of the year, the Nationals would not put him back in. That would be seen as surely that'd be just like committing ritual seppuku. Surely they wouldn't do it.
Adam Christopher trying to see the best in people. Doreen once again pops up his head. No, they're there is a portion of this party that is just a bunch of willful idiots, and they don't care. They have their guy, and their guy will it's just factionalism, right? It has nothing to do with whether it would be good for the party or even good for the voters or good for Australia. They don't think about any of that. It's all literal political jockeying to be in the in-group and whatever in-group's in at the time that the government's in charge. It's
Can you imagine
it's
Meryl
not about
from marketing just being like, they changed leaders. I got to
redo all the stationery, mate. We just did the rebrand. Why didn't they tell us before we did the rebrand? We spent $60,000 on stationery.
Of course, it's a national sport, so there's probably the leadership spill. That is a national sport of the leadership spill, which is
we love a leadership spill.
Even a NatSpill, a lesser spill on the Bristol Palin stool chart of spills, it definitely ranks as a bottom 3.
Look, after 18 months of the pandemic, I think we're all in. We've all earned a little treat of like a mini spill.
Do you reckon there's market odds out there?
I guarantee there's market odds.
Good odds.
People bet on everything, Adam. Like, actually, in fact, there's so many people I know who like they get their, they sort of analyze their political beliefs of sort of like where the wind's going just based on the betting. Because they're like the people who the odds are the ones, those are the polls you should trust, apparently.
There's a story from that's from previously from 2017. They had odds on Barnaby Joyce winning his seat.
It's got to be a thing.
But yeah, like it is not uncommon for like, especially during election seasons with political figures to have, odds placed on them and on, Sportsbet and those kinds of services. So, it is literally like the worst incarnation of politics as entertainment, like political theater. It is like stark and grubby when you see those things online, but like also thoroughly entertaining. It does definitely, especially when it's your political enemies. It does bring a smile to the face. As Tom said, we've had a hard year. We deserve a treat. And if that's a couple of pollies that we don't like backstabbing each other to death, then a tu brute had me a knife.
Shakespeare's Julius Caesar is trending on Twitter,
which might be the first and only time that's ever happened.
Anything else we want to say about McCormack? Do you want to wish him well? Do you want to? It's going to be a fun week. This story will already be outdated by the time people are listening to it. But
I suppose I'd just say to him that if a spill happens and if he loses, I'll buy him a latte. That'll cheer him up.
Probably won't cheer up Greg Hunt, though, who is obviously our health minister and had to give out the advice that he'd received this week that the AstraZeneca vaccine is now probably only good for people over the age of 60.
So previously
it's been over the age of 50.
Over the age of 50, and now they're saying over the age of 60, which does beg the question, what do you do for all of the hundreds of thousands of people that have been vaccinated with their first jab of the AstraZeneca who are between the ages of 50 and 60? To which the answer seems to be like, yeah, go ahead, don't worry about it, it's fine. Probably fine.
But I was reading, like, I guess the frustrating thing around just all the messaging of the vaccines, already has been an absolute clusterfuck.
What do you mean? But it's been a flawless campaign of media, of technical marketing efficiency. Meryl from marketing has had a great fucking year. Working from home, gets to spend some time with the kids. It's been an absolute fucking cushy delight for Meryl, Adam, working in the Australian government marketing department.
Named Meryl in your marketing department that you like your office that you have a particular beef with? Like it's
just alliteration. Meryl from marketing.
Meryl from marketing, right.
And it's someone that would be called Meryl who probably would work in marketing as well. So
that's fair enough. But yeah, so like there was an article I saw pop up, I think it was on the ABC or something like that, where, it was one of those like question answer articles of like, I've had my first AstraZeneca jab. Like, is it okay for me to have my second, or could I get Pfizer for my second shot? What would happen?
You'll
die. XYZ, right?
So you'll spontaneously combust. What the fuck do you think is going to happen? Just get the vaccine. Get your fucking vaccine.
Well, that's the thing. It was putting out stuff like, it's like, oh yeah, you can have your, if you've had no complications following your first AstraZeneca shot, having a second AstraZeneca shot, you're probably going to be fine. So you can get that. Although, like, trials are underway as to whether you can mix and match the vaccines. And maybe in some instances, if your second shot's a Pfizer or whatever, maybe it would be better. And I'm like, no, stop telling people this. Get the shot.
Don't overcomplicate it for people.
Stop it.
Go and get your vaccine. Don't try and shop around and see what's the best one is going to be and do a little online comparison, use a bit of Trustpilot. Like, it's the fucking vaccine. Go get the vaccine. If your doctor tells you to get the vaccine, go and get the vaccine.
I think it's an interesting concept. George and Tom, you guys were discussing earlier this week that we're in such a privileged position. And there was an article in the ABC which talked about this, where people were saying it's great that we have choice. We want to have the choice to be able to do things. Meanwhile, and this is a comparison, you go to Indonesia, where the one vaccine you can get, or the one they've been rolling out to everyone, is the Chinese Sinovac one, and they've just had to fucking take it, and people are still getting affected with it because it's not very good, but people have still been taking it. Like, we're in a position here in Australia where at least we've got vaccines of a high quality. Half the world doesn't have that choice. Half the world isn't in the position we're in.
But it's all right, because Demi Castanos, in her 50s, says, quote, "I was relieved to hear that I can now, as a 52-year-old, get a Pfizer vaccine," she said. But also a little bit sad because it took the death of another person before the government changed its policy. Like, it's such a...
Yeah.
Who are these people, by the way, who are happy to be quoted in an ABC article just being like, "Hi, I'm so relieved that I can get my Pfizer vaccine now. I'm so happy that I, as a consumer, get a choice." It's like, mate, it's not a fucking dishwasher. It is a life-saving tool. Meanwhile, all the plebs over in India just get what they're fucking given. And you should be fucking pleased about it, you bunch of fucking plebs. Covax, you get what you're given, mate. Beggars can't be choosers. But over here in Australia, it's like we're looking for a new Hilux. We're like, I don't know. I'm going to go over to the Brighton Toyota and see what the price they can give me there is. Like, it's a vaccine, the way you fucking selfish fuck. Take the vaccine.
Yeah, the fact that she referred to it as like the consumers can have a choice. It was like that particular like kind of language is like, you're not, we shouldn't be shopping for this sort of shit. Like,
consumer
you're
choice
lucky there's a fucking
code.
vaccine at all.
Consumer choice is code for rich white people doing whatever the fuck they want at the expense of everyone else in the world. You know, the plebs in India get what they're given and they should be fucking grateful, but us, by virtue of the pot of dirt that we happened to, when our dad came in our mum, and that was done in this pot of dirt as opposed to another pot of dirt, means we should get a choice and everyone else shouldn't get a choice. That is fucking morally bankrupt. It is fucking disgraceful that people are thinking in these terms.
I don't want to undermine the point you're making there, George, but I think it's less like where someone's dad deposits their sperm in the mum, as you so put it.
Deposit is worse.
Location. It's not so much where that occurs, it's more where you, the baby, are then birthed.
This is true.
Matters. Because you could be in different pots of dirt between those two events.
This is true.
Or you could not be in dirt at all. You could be in between dirt.
Yeah, you could be International Space Station and then
floating somewhere.
Citizenship's cooked
in a sink. Anyway,
what happens if you give birth on a plane? These are the important questions.
Look, to reframe this though. So, I mean, if the government's medical advice is there's too much of a risk to take the vaccine, should people be ignoring that advice? Is that what we're saying, or are we saying
I understand that we need to listen to the medical advice, and that's what we on this podcast have always been proponents of. However, I do think that much like a mountain has been made out of a molehill, in that of the hundreds of the millions of people that have now been vaccinated, that 2 people have had situations where they've had fatal blood clots, is not we're suffering from a situation where we are acutely aware of all of the, what did Norman Swan called it? It was like post-marketing surveillance or something like that. Like, because everyone has their eyes on this, we are, and the media gets ginned up every time any minor incident happens to any individual all across the world. Everyone's attention and focus gets spotlighted on this one individual in a way that we just don't with other medications, right? There is an inherent risk in everything. The literal 1 in whatever it is, 2.7 million chance that you might get blood clots and die, a condition that we're now aware of and are looking out for and can treat if it arises. That seems to me to pale in comparison against the 1 in 100 chance of death that getting COVID would give you. Or if you're an elderly person in their 70s and 80s, a 1 in 10 chance of death, not to mention all the people that have really serious like conditions, long COVID after, having gotten COVID. So like, it is not a responsible representation of the facts to scare people off.
We're not the medical advisors. We can't make that determination. And I don't really want to jump into that.
I'm not saying that if they say it's safe, if the risk matrix means that someone over 60 should take it, and that's the rule, that's fine. That makes sense to me. What what shits me is that I don't feel as though that is the calculus that's necessarily being made. It seems like the government is responding to bad news stories and pumping the brakes on the vaccine rollout, which is already taken far, far too long. Like,
they're taking that advice from, it's not the government. The government's made the determination based on medical advice from a peak body. Like, it's not like they're just pulling it out of their ass. Although you could argue,
but none of these bodies are immune to pressure. Like, a medical peak body is still vulnerable to public pressure. I don't think it's any safer or less safe now for 50-year-olds today than it was yesterday.
I think the problem
effect is people are not going to get vaccinated, and it's just going to drag this crisis on longer, and more people are going to die. Like,
to my end, the problem is more so similar to what it was during lockdown, in that we're in a democracy, everyone gets to have their say, including us. So we benefit from that to some degree. But what that does is it clouds.
Unless you're a YouTube comedian that talks about the Deputy Premier of New South Wales, but we'll talk about that in a sec.
It clouds the messaging. It clouds the people's behaviors. People's behaviors become they change, and they become more diverse, and people become hesitant to do things because they saw something. Now, I guess, and that's part of the culture we live in. So whether it be someone saying during lockdown, I don't need to wear a mask, that's horseshit, the stats don't stack up, or whether it be someone now being like, I don't want to get the vaccine, the stats don't stack up. We're in that same, it's suffering from the same thing, which is that we're in an echo chamber of, as you said, micro focus. It's something that for me is less of a news story. Like, this shouldn't be so much treated as a soap opera news story. It should be a health program that is run out, that is, launched.
But the problem is that because of the reticence of the current government to really engage in this process, the narrative is being driven by the media. It's not being driven by the government, and not because the government hasn't got the money to launch a national ad campaign saying, like, I still haven't seen the national ad campaign of go and get the vaccine. Like, it should be fucking everywhere, right? Like, it should be a situation where we are doing, beg, borrow, and steal. Do whatever you have to do to get people to go and get the vaccine. And I'm not seeing that kind of national rollout. And in lieu of that, in the vacuum that leaves, you've got media. You've got media filling in the gaps. And media, there's lots of good media out there. There's lots of traditional media out there that's doing good work, but they are driven by incentives. And if it bleeds, it leads is a saying, because it is kind of true. The story that will get the media attention is the story that is the most sensational, the most gory, the most out of the blue, the most unusual thing. The reason it's in the news is because it's unusual, right? And that's what people want to see. It's novel. But that doesn't necessarily stack up with a public health initiative to get people to go and get the vaccine. It will make a mountain out of a molehill out of one woman in her early 50s who died of blood clots as a result of the vaccine. And that will cause hesitancy, which, if there's another outbreak and we get 800 cases a day and those people aren't vaccinated because they were hesitant, it will result in real, actual deaths in the community. Like, it is dangerous to talk about these things in this way, because it makes people hesitant. And it's the only way that we're going to get out of this is if everyone gets vaccinated.
Yeah.
Right?
If everyone's sick of lockdowns, the only way we can stop lockdowns is to, quote unquote, cure the disease, which the closest we're going to get is being vaccinated against it.
Coronavirus is not going to go away. At some point, we need to open up the economy. We're going to need to allow people back into the country. That has to happen at some point. So the only way we can safely do that is if we're all vaccinated. You don't get a choice. It's not a matter of whether you want to or not. You just have to fucking bite the bullet and do it.
Should I had a question here and it's gone now. I hate it when that happens. Should people just take whatever? Here's another way of phrasing it. Should the government ignore the medical advice on the balance of the greater good, or the utilitarian perspective, which is the more people that are vaccinated, the better for the whole country, and stuff the consequences down the line for...
I don't want to say, ignore the medical advice. I think in this particular situation, I don't think the risk, like the risk matrix, they always talk about the risk matrix. We haven't got an outbreak here, so the risk here is lower, whereas someone in their 50s in the UK is recommended to get the AstraZeneca because the coronavirus circulating amount there is higher, right? There's more coronavirus around, there's more dangerous, the risk calculation changes. I don't think that the medical advice builds in the fact that things here could get much worse if there's a spectacular new outbreak like we saw around this time last year. Well, then the risk calculus changes pretty substantively. And if you've got a largely unvaccinated population, the risk of real people coming into real harm is substantively greater. So I think it's predicated on a faulty idea of saying, well, there's no coronavirus in the community here in Australia, so the risk calculation is changes. Everyone take their time. But the opportunity cost of everyone taking their time means that should there be a resurgence later, we're in a really bad position to combat it because we were basing our assessment off a risk matrix that is now outdated. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if that's how they do it, but I'm assuming it'll be something like that.
We're assessing it based on the current risk. We're not
Yeah.
thinking about the potential
Yeah.
future risk, and we're not building that into the equation.
And I think that's a good question. Is to sort of, again, you look at places like and this is the thing, is that I'm wondering with new variants whether even the vaccines are going to save us, because you look at places like Indonesia where lots of people are vaccinated with, I think it's Sinovac, and like there was a story today where a guy who was fully vaccinated, he invented a portable what do they call it?
Like the swabby thing.
No, the intubated, what's the thing you go on when you get COVID and it gets really bad? Ventilator, portable ventilator for everyone. National hero of Indonesia dies of COVID-19, even though he's fully vaccinated, because that particular vaccine isn't effective against whatever strain's being pushed through the community right now.
And also, like, the idea of the vaccine isn't necessarily that you are immune to getting the virus. It's all about the more people who are vaccinated means there are fewer opportunities for it to spread. And eventually, if enough people are vaccinated, you've limited that.
Some of it is about reducing spread. Like my understanding of the mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, is that it goes some way to limiting spread, but the major point of all of the vaccines is to reduce the situation. Yeah, reduce the case of death, which they're like overwhelmingly very good at doing. So you might still get COVID if you're vaccinated, but you won't die, or you're much, much less likely to die of COVID than you otherwise would. And I think just by having a months-long conversation about the dangers of AstraZeneca blood clots, which like as a fraction of like a percentage of risk, absolutely pale into the like distant horizon when compared against the very real risk of like dying of COVID. It's not helpful, and it contributes to hesitancy, which means the whole crisis is just going to go on longer and more people will die.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things is like, how do you... Yeah, I mean, if the risk matrix, if that's the way they're using it at the moment, like I was talking about here on the podcast, isn't going to change it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there is another outbreak.
How dare you remind me of my irrelevance, Adam?
No, but all I'm just saying is...
That's my wife's job. What are you doing?
It'd be really interesting in like... there's a lady in Queensland at the moment who just came out of quarantine and still had it and's been spreading it around. Like if a situation like that takes off and then there's another Melbourne-style lockdown or Melbourne-style event, how that medical advice changes.
I can't. We can't be dealing with this in 5 years, in 10 years. Like at some point, there'll have to be an international effort to get everyone vaccinated. Like it can't just be a situation where like every 2 to 3 months we just lock down our state for the rest of our lives. Like that is not a solution to the problem. There needs to be a permanent solution to the problem. And the only thing that I can see, as far as I can tell, is us being vaccinated.
And I thought I've seen things being like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like thrown around and stuff like that in terms of like when people say like the likelihood of side effects like blood clots or anything like that is like similar, if not better, than like the birth control pill.
Oh, birth control is way more dangerous in terms of blood clots that are caused to women. It is like orders of magnitude safer than the birth control pill. Which
is just something
we don't fucking ask any questions.
Yeah.
Girls just go into their GP and the GP goes, "Oh, yeah, all right, love. Yeah, all right. Here's your pill." Like, there's, there are risks that we undertake every day that are orders of magnitude higher than the risk of taking a vaccine. But because it's a new thing, because everyone's eyes are on it, the risk and we're terrible as a species at gauging risk. It's just blown all out of proportion. And, I remember we talked about on the show how many people die of, Panadol overdoses every year. It was like 25 to 30 people. Like, so, that we have to have some proportionality. Like, no medication is completely perfect in 100% of people all of the time. There is no medication that exists that does that. But, we need to accept that there is a certain amount of, like, I remember, was it Penny Wong or someone tweeted, like, your chance of getting hit by lightning is 1 in 1.6 million. It was like, it was less, you have more of a chance of being hit by lightning than you do of getting a blood clot as a result of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Like, we need to have some, like, fucking, if you get
flying a plane is safer than driving. Yeah.
It really is. Like, if you take a 1 hour drive, you've got a 1 in a million chance of dying. So, like, let's just reassess. Let's readjust our. We're just very emotive creatures, and I don't know that there's a way around it other than asking, like, "Hey, media, could you be a little bit more responsible with how you report this, please?" Yeah. But like, the financial incentives are directly opposed to that. So.
Yeah, but in the meantime, no AstraZucchini for anyone under the age of 60.
It's actually pronounced electrozucchini.
Electrozucchini, sorry.
Stop spreading misinformation, you cuck.
Yeah, but we can have fiber out the wazoo if you're under 60 then.
Speaking about spreading misinformation, Friendlyjordies been in the news a lot lately. Not that they necessarily spread misinformation, but
careful, mate. Careful. They'll send you fixated persons unit after you, mate. Watch out. Defamation lawsuit.
There are some people, particularly...
Friendlyjordies won't. You've got that story the wrong way around, Adam. Friendlyjordies will just send an army of angry dude bros on the internet after you.
There's a lot of angry dude bros that are buying on this at the moment. But, of course, if you haven't been paying attention...
former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd is one of those angry dude bros, I should mention. So he came out with a statement supporting Friendlyjordies and said he was
angriest dude bro.
Donate to his legal fund. Yeah, well, Adam, why don't you tell the people who Friendlyjordies are if they don't know? I wonder what the Venn diagram is of people who know who we are but don't know who Friendlyjordies is. I wonder if there's any overlap there, but probably not. Go ahead.
Friendlyjordies, YouTuber, comedian, who has about 500,000, I think, subscribers on YouTube, so he's pretty popular. Does a lot of stuff used to be just like all about like weird, funny, silly videos with wigs and voices. Now does a lot of...
Let's do like last night on maths, Married at First Sight. And there'd be a lot of those sorts of like, dumb culture content. And it's gotten like very serious and political over the last couple of years.
And over the last 12 months, he's had a real dig at Deputy Premier John Barilaro.
About
New South Wales.
About whom we have nothing to say.
I literally know nothing about the guy.
Neither do I.
For this story.
I am Your Honor, I am completely unaware of Mr. Barilaro and any of the things that he may or may not have done in relation to the government or Jordan Shanks. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Gladys Berejiklian on the other hand. No.
You mean koala killer Gladys?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't need to know about that. Taps the nose, Gladys Jeremy.
So, Friendlyjordies, the channel is, it's part of its thing is that they do make sort of broad, sweeping generalizations and for the purpose of comedy, right? So, as a part of that,
you're speaking like an alien who's just discovered satire.
What is satire?
What is satire?
So the Premier, there's been a lot of send-ups of the Deputy Premier, and he hasn't taken too fondly to that and has actually launched a lawsuit against the Friendlyjordies channel, Jordan Shanks, and I think his producer as well, for defamation, basically saying that he's making fun of his Italian heritage and using, bros, like all that kind of silly language. And
first of all, as someone who's Italian, can I say, objectively hilarious. Like, when he uses the Italian voice and says and calls everyone stooge. I think personally, as an Italian, I think it's funny. So it gets the cultural Italian seal of approval from me, as far as I'm concerned. So,
oh boy,
tell that to John because he's not too impressed. Anyway, so I guess what that's meant is because of this lawsuit, the channel has kind of taken it like a I don't know, like a dog with a bone. Like they've just gone at him.
Well, the glove slap has happened. Like they've taken it as like, oh, you challenged me to a duel, huh? And
the one thing that you should know about YouTube comedians is that
they love drama.
Yes. So if you go to them with like some red meat, like I'm going to sue you for defamation, that's not going to scare someone like Jordan Shanks off. If anything, it's only going to make them dig their heels in and double down on the bit, which is exactly what he did when he dressed up as Luigi and crashed one of his events.
One of his events.
It's
the kind of shit the Chaser does.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah, so turning up in costume and lampooning politicians and things like that. And of course, the Chaser often went too far in a lot of cases.
Do you remember that time when the Chaser dressed up as Osama bin Laden and drove into APEC and got past all the security measures? In terms of political satire and like sending up politicians and turning up at their events dressed up as funny things. Like it really is on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of what professional comedians have done. And the Chasers, it seems like very much like early Chaser stuff. And they harassed politicians way more than
all the time.
Than Friendlyjordies turning up at things constantly and, sort of yelling at people and, doing bits and pretending to be a journalist and asking dumb questions to it, that was their whole shtick, and they did it for 15 years, largely unmolested.
The ABC had a producing team and a legal team,
yes,
sitting behind this team of 6 comedians. Friendlyjordies is like 2 or 3 guys in a room doing YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a risk factor there. If we talked about risk matrices before, there's a risk factor there to the YouTubers in this instance, where they probably haven't got as much of a back end to support them as the national broadcaster.
Although I did see a Crikey article this week, which I thought was interesting. I was like, what was the point of this exactly? But it basically talked about how much money they reckon Jordan Shanks is making off his YouTube channel. With he's got X amount of Patreon subscribers. The minimum amount of Patreon, commit to this thing is like $1. So therefore, we reckon during this whole crisis, he's made about $200,000. And he's probably making like $400,000 a year based on these numbers. And that's at the low end of this. I was like, what is the point of this article exactly? To say like,
he doesn't need a legal fund.
Yeah, he doesn't need a legal fund and he deserves to get sued because he's doing well for himself. He's like one of the, a well-earning YouTube comedian. Like, what is the point of this article exactly? It just felt like a weird fucking smear piece from Crikey. I was like, okay, thanks guys. Thanks for adding to the discourse.
Are they saying that I think the point of that is that he's profiting off the chaos.
He's surprisingly well funded. I was like, okay, well, just because he's doing okay, his YouTube channel's doing well, but don't forget there's like multiple people employed under him. Like it's a business. So just because he's earning revenue doesn't mean that he's just like pocketing $400,000 post-tax. Like, there's a whole enterprise. They're working. He's got employees. They're making videos. He's got it is shocking that, and we're sort of skipping ahead of it. We'll actually tell you the content of the story in a second, but it is shocking and very chilling that the Deputy Premier is not just suing a comedian for defamation, but also had his producer arrested by the Fixated Persons Unit at his home as a response to being approached in the street about it. Like,
so what happens?
It is
who are the
clear who has
Persons
the
Unit?
Power in this situation, and it's not the YouTube comedian, right? Like,
so who are the New South Wales Fixated Persons Unit, and what did they do?
Mm-hmm. So this is a unit that was set up in the wake of the Lint Cafe siege. So, several years ago now, there was a Muslim man who, I don't know exactly what the intention was there, but he took a bunch of people in a hostage situation in the Link Cafe in Sydney, and it was a long protracted struggle. Anyway, he ended up being killed. to resolve that sort of crisis by police. So it was created to monitor extremists and fixated persons who may not fall under Australia's counter-terrorism laws, but may nonetheless pose a risk of serious violence. So the idea being, I guess, maybe it's a right-wing extremist who's like harassing a far-left politician, or something like that, like we had in the Day X podcast series that I was talking about, the German assassination attempt. Things like that, whereas like people at a risk of political violence that aren't necessarily affiliated with like ISIS or something like that.
Yeah.
It is entirely inappropriate to send this fixated persons unit to a 21-year-old's house and arrest him in the middle of the day for approaching the deputy premier. Like,
yeah, for being bothered at press conferences and things like that.
It was two events. One event where they crashed this event at a restaurant or whatever it was, or at a venue with Jordan Shanks dressed up as Luigi. And then another time where Christo was walking on his way to uni. This is how young this guy is. Walking on his way to uni, sees John Barilaro across the street, and this is all filmed and documented in the Friendlyjordies video, so you can see the exchange take place. And he says like, "Oh, I've got something for you," and it was related to the lawsuit that Barilaro's lawyer had delivered them. And it was a long story, but like the address on the lawsuit, the defamation lawsuit, was incorrect. It was like addressed as Parliament House when it should have been Barilaro's personal address or something like that. And he was like walking to uni, he sees him and he has the paperwork with him and he goes, "Oh, I've got something for you." He goes like, hey, it's like, it's me, it's Christo, you're trying to sue my boss kind of thing. Like I'm doing something in my work capacity here. Barilaro ignores him. He's on the phone, jumps into a car, drives off. And then the police report says something to the effect of like, he followed him for 200 meters and like, accosted him and said he was corrupt and like all stuff that we can see in the video from the recording just like didn't happen. And then they sent the fixated persons unit to his house and arrested him and, kept him for the maximum amount of time before being able to post bail. All this sort of,
I skipped over this. This is the producer of the video.
This is the producer of Jordan Shanks, who's literally like a guy in his early 20s. Christo Lanka, 21. And it's obviously a flex from the deputy premier to have a chilling effect on people who want to make fun of him or who want to question him more. And as to the truth of the allegations that they've made against him, I mean, that's all in publicly sourced reporting. You can go and Google John Barilaro and make your own determinations about, whether or not you think it's appropriate for him to be a member of parliament, given some of the track record of things that he's done. But it seems like, I don't know, as someone who shit talks politicians and makes jokes on the internet, I don't know about you guys, I found this very distressing to watch this video. Like, the cops pushed over his mum and they, like injured his dog and like, threw him to the ground in his family home and sort of yanked him out of there in the middle of the day. Like, it was a very distressing video to watch. We'd play it. I just don't think people from an audio perspective would get much out of it. It's just like, I was kind of
he went willingly out of the house. They sort of like dragged him out effectively.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
Well, like he was trying to hand his phone to his mum, being like, here's my phone. And they're like, no, that's evidence. Like, and then it like caused a scuffle. And it was just like wholly inappropriate for a comedian to be responded to in this way. Like,
and the vibe I get is especially the how young the guy is as well might have played into the thinking here of like, let's frighten the shit out of these people.
Oh, this was the point.
Like, like it's one thing to kind of send the cops around to someone's house, but it's like, no, let's, we'll scare the shit out of these kids so that they'll back off.
An old,
terrifying,
old school, like,
ham-fisted.
I don't know. Like, it's like, obviously this is going to backfire for you because it's going to be all over the internet.
It doesn't it doesn't make you look good.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, as the deputy premier, you must know that this is going to end up in negative headlines for you to report this kid to the police and to come down in such a draconian, heavy-handed way. It makes you look like, and this is no commentary on whether he is, it makes you look like the kind of political figure that they sketch in their videos. like someone who's sort of dark and shady.
Be a boss or something, like,
Right.
you know.
You know, and first of all, Adam, that's extremely fucking racist just because he's Italian. No, but like...
There are different mafias from different cultures. I know
There
what
you
you're talking
go.
about.
Good save.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't make you look like, you know, the party of free speech, which the Liberals purport to be, right? So at the very least,
their base would it's like the opposite thing to what their base would be like. I reckon I'd be interested to hear,
Avi
Avi
Yemeni. Yeah.
like who's a right wing.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
I'd love to see what his take is on this, because it's effectively the thing that he hates, right? Which is the media, free speech being clamped down on.
All these right wingers talk about fucking the media and cancel culture and freedom of speech, but all of that, it's horseshit, because immediately when someone enters into what is obviously free speech that they don't like, they're like, fucking put the bad hammer on them, fuck this cunt. Like, you know, all these people that are free speech warriors during the day, all their argument for freedom of speech really exists to perpetuate is their idea of freedom of speech. Is speech
their
that
own personal
speech that I like should be free, right? Like, and freedom of speech means not that you get cancelled or you lose your job at CNN because you wanked on camera. Freedom of speech is you get to speak truth to power, and you don't get a government response. You don't get arrested and sued by the... There is not a government
Sky
response
News
to your speech.
Fucking getting hauled out of the studio. I don't see Andrew what's his name? Chris Kenny or any of...
Alan Jones.
Alan Jones getting hauled down the street for fucking saying a bunch of random stuff that's completely unverified.
Why? Because they have corporate organizations behind them. Because the New South Wales government doesn't want to go to war with Sky News if they disagree with them, because Murdoch's behind it. And there's going to be there's a whole legal department. There's a media apparatus. Murdoch's a heavyweight. What if he goes against us on this issue? What's that going to do to us politically? The reason that they felt free to put the boot into this guy is because he's fucking nobody. Is because he doesn't have a massive corporate apparatus behind him. He's not owned by Nine Media Group. He's not, like it is literally just a comedian with a camera and a couple of producers. And they go, oh, fuck it, let's ruin his life.
It's also interesting that, like, we're in this sort of phase at the moment where, you know, the ABC does a report on war crimes in Afghanistan and then they get sued by Ben Roberts-Smith.
Yeah.
The ABC does a report on,
war crimes in Afghanistan, and then they get raided by the AFP.
The ABC does a report on Christian Porter potentially, having misconduct, and they get sued by Christian Porter. Like, there is this thing now where
Peter Dutton sending cease and desists to people on Twitter that were it's that were questioning him about the what was it, the Biloela family or whatever it was. Someone was people were shit talking Peter Dutton on Twitter because Twitter is a cesspool. And probably it's Peter Dutton, so probably rightly, but to be so thin-skinned as to send like legal cease and desists to people comment, like, this is what being a politician is. I'm sorry to say that when you become a public figure like this and when you command a bunch of power, you should expect criticism. You should expect satire. You should expect people making fun of you. You should expect cartoonists drawing unflattering pictures of your big fucking head. Like, this is what it means to be a public figure, is that you are now in the public eye. It's not like you're an actor. I wouldn't expect that kind of vitriol for like Brad Pitt, but to a certain degree, when you're a politician, when you enter into that arena, you accept a background level of criticism and public outrage that's going to follow you no matter what you do. And if you can't handle that, you shouldn't be in the game. And Kevin Rudd said as much in his statement about the Friendlyjordies situation. Like, hey, bro, have you seen all the Murdoch headlines about me? Like, for over years, criticizing me and saying nasty things about my government. Like, this is what you should grow to expect as a public figure.
I mean, there's a within reason on that sort of stuff where there's
obviously
actually
you can't make death threats,
like legitimate,
within reason, obviously. But to cite publicly sourced reporting and to make commentary and extrapolations about that, which I feel like that's what Friendlyjordies has done. I don't think he's he's obviously saying a bunch of stuff for comedic purposes. I don't think any of it is necessarily unfair.
Oh.
But then I'm a Labor partisan, so like I'm inclined to agree with him.
Yeah.
But the point is, it doesn't matter whether you agree with him or not. He has the freedom of speech to say these things, and the point of suing him and the point of getting the police involved and making it a criminal matter is to have a chilling effect on this kind of discourse, which I think is wrong.
It just seems to happen that there's an increase where there is that kind of thing with left-minded media at the moment. Like, we can criticize them. We've criticized the media literally like 10 minutes ago about.
Sorry, explain a little bit more.
Or just with the stuff from the ABC, Friendlyjordies, whatever else. Anyone who is potentially criticizing governments in power at the moment is getting a lawsuit thrown in their face, or potential lawsuit thrown in their face. That seems to be sort of the modus operandi, I think, with a lot of politicians at the moment, and the parties and the media outlets behind them as well. As you said, to have a chilling effect. It'd be really interesting if there is a change in governments, whether that be in New South Wales, Victoria, federally, whatever, whether or not that same practice continues on the other way around. And as you said, they probably wouldn't do it because the people that are commenting on this kind of stuff tend to be more established from the Murdoch press or whatever else.
I just find it funny that the party that, tried to reform, what was it, 15C?
18C. The Racial Discrimination Act.
Yes. Yeah. And George Brandis famously said that, people have the right to be bigots, like they fight and die on these hills with all this culture war stuff and freedom of speech. And then as soon as someone says something about them they don't like, they're like, fucking take him to jail. He's obsessed with me. Like, it just seems like so
it's
dramatically thin-skinned. Like,
is he actually fearing, like, are you fearing for your life? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah.
Like, do you think
Deputy Premier? Are you really? You think the 21-year-old kid going to music uni for music is really going to be the guy that takes you out? You're really fearing for your life. You're so in fear for your life that you didn't even look up from your phone when he came up to you. You just got into the car and ignored him. Like, I don't know. It's really just a bit fucking rich from this side of politics. I don't know. Like, what do you guys think? Do you think, does it concern you as people who speak on the internet on a regular basis about political figures? Does this like freak you out at all?
Oh, definitely. Like, it's sort of a thought. No, I've never thought that like maybe the feds will kick my door in and drag me out and all that sort of stuff. But it is the kind of thing of like, stepping in in dicey waters, at least, that if, people are thin-skinned enough, like, while maybe a case might not get off the ground or all that sort of stuff, to still even be served defamation accusations or any of that you have to defend in court or any of that sort of stuff is still quite stressful and terrifying. Like, I was thinking about it recently because I've started seeing a whole lot of, tweets from various either outlets or people about Andrew Laming, recontextualizing things that they said about him. And they're all kind of saying the same thing. They're all as in
you reckon they've received a cease and desist?
They definitely have.
Yeah. Wow.
Because they're saying, I don't know how much of it I should clarify in case then I'm stepping in the waters of doing the exact thing that they're having to rescind.
Which is the point. They just did. They just made you do the thing that you wanted to do. They wanted you to do, which was self-censor your own shit.
It was about the photo scandal. Taking a photo of the woman who was bending over. There was some of the language that was used around that implied an action that he didn't do, it seems, based on that. So people have been tweeting like, hey, at this time we made tweets asserting that Andrew Laming did this. This is not the case. We've deleted the tweets and we rescind the blah. I've seen several people doing that.
He didn't do it up her skirt. He did it from what, like a couple of meters away?
She wasn't wearing a skirt, Adam. That's the thing. She wasn't wearing a skirt. Right. Oh. She was wearing shorts. She took maybe a photo of her bending over. That's not an upskirt. Isn't this what I said?
Like, isn't that like, that's the point I made. It's like, it's not an upskirt photo if you're not like beneath someone taking a photo up their skirt.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, exactly. So but when I started seeing these tweets,
you guys laughed at me. You guys mocked me when I made that point.
I definitely was racking my brain at the time when I started seeing these tweets being like, fuck, what did we describe it as at the time? And fucking, oh man, am I glad that maybe like we aren't a big enough fish to get a letter like that.
So
but,
he didn't go around and then get the phone and go like that within a meter of her body, but he's still from however far away.
It seems like
whatever she was wearing was still taking a photo.
Still took a photo that is incredibly questionable and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it seemed
still
like
still not good. Still not good.
The implied nature of saying that someone took upskirt photos when they clearly bothered him, right?
I understood how it came about as a descriptor, but it is not completely accurate. It is taking a inappropriate photo of someone.
So it seems that's the hill that Andrew Lamming is dying on by the looks of it, because I saw even.
But I'm not a big cunt.
I'm a different kind of cunt.
Like the website The Shot that David Milner and stuff writes for, put out one of these tweets.
Oh wow.
Like, they're the website that I think one of their recent articles said something like, Scott Morrison's Australia is fucking embarrassing. And they said something like, actually, David Milner had a line recently that was fantastic, which I'm just going to find real quick because it is bloody brilliant.
David Milner, who we've mentioned on the show previously, a games journalist, now voice of the revolution, who writes for The Shot, and who we like 80% sure that we saw at the Gabs Beer Festival several weeks ago, and kind of geeked out. It might be the lowest kind of fame. It's like
who he was.
Being excited, you and I, Tom, being excited about seeing
we saw him at an event.
A journalist who writes about niche left politics at a beer festival might be like the lowest rung of fame, but I was like very sincerely excited to see him.
Let me put it this way. Like, if I'd seen him at PAX a couple years earlier, like, especially when he was working more in games media and that sort of stuff, I would have walked up to him and been like, oh, it's David Milner. Like, hey, I'm a big fan of your work, blah, 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 blah. At the beer festival, following all the stuff of The Shot and him being like Twitter famous as the voice of the revolution in Melbourne, I was too anxious to go bother him. Like, it would be like if I saw fucking Brad Pitt somewhere, as we mentioned before, just to be like, oh no, I don't want to bother him. Like, he probably gets fans all the time.
It's almost,
like, I'm blushing.
It's almost worse because like I respect David Milner intellectually. Like, if I came up to Brad Pitt, I'd be like, oh man, your movies are good, you're a good actor. Like, but I wouldn't be like intimidated by his intelligence. Whereas like David Milner, I feel like I'd be like a schoolgirl. I'd be like, you're so smart, you write so good. How do you write about politics so good?
He's one of the best sentences I think he's ever written, which is talking about the G7 and that Boris Johnson and Scott Morrison and all that were like awkward and was there. Said, Boris, let the bodies hit the floor, Johnson. A bedraggled hybrid of Donald Trump and Mr. Bean via a creepy hyper-elite boarding school that churns out UK prime ministers like Liberal staffers churn out desk cum. An amazing line.
Wow.
Amazing.
Desk
bloody
cum.
love it. 10 out of 10, Dave. We love you around here. But anyway, even the website that writes that did one of these tweets of we retract our statements about Andrew Lamming.
It's one thing though to get a cease and desist and then to like update your wording or like I kind of expect something like that to happen on the national media stage where there is a bit of a back and forth.
You'd be hit by that sort of stuff all the time. You'd be hit with a backlash of like, you reported this, we feel this is inaccurate for these reasons. And you can make an editorial decision as to whether you stand by your reporting or if it is new evidence that was overlooked and you can update your stuff, blah, 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 blah.
If there are
but when you
factual
send in the
inaccuracies,
cops to kick in the door, to drag them out just because you don't like what they said, that's a whole nother level. And yeah, it is the kind of, whenever we talk about, I'm probably rehashing what we said like 10 minutes ago, but whenever we have talked about like people decrying like the squashing of free speech just because of quote unquote cancel culture, where just people don't like what you said and are calling you pieces of shit for saying it. the thing is, like, an actual affront on free speech is when you say something, particularly about the government, that the government doesn't like, and they come and
the
arrest
secret
you.
police roll up. Yes, exactly.
People just saying, "Hey, what you said was shitty," or like, "Hey," with all the like, I don't know, with Friendlyjordies and the whole the Italian references with Barilaro, people saying like, "Hey, what you're saying's racist." That's not an affront on Geordie's on like the Friendlyjordies free speech.
You are free to call him a racist.
They're criticizing his behavior, and for the record, I don't like him. I think he's a dickhead. But like, yeah, criticizing all that sort of stuff. But when you kick his door in and like arrest him for saying it, then you're affronting the free speech. And that's literally what has happened. This is actually an instance of the government interfering in speech they don't like.
Oh, and the
1984. It's a bit 1984.
And the kind of conditions that were put on Christo Lanka was, it's like he can't reference
the producer.
Yeah, the guy who was arrested, saying that he can't reference John Barilaro, he can't own a picture of him, like all these kind of like weird fucking all these weird restrictions, which are like,
what if he says, no, actually, I'd like to go home and set up a photo of Lord Master Barilaro with, I'd like candles and I will pray to it every night. And it's kind of like, that's what I want to do. Don't you want me to do that? Don't you want me to do that?
Turns out the fixated persons unit doesn't want you to do that for whatever reason. But
to be fixated on a person. Oh shit. Yeah.
Like, yeah, all these
Jesus is fucked.
All these weird restrictions, and their lawyer said something to the effect of like, in all my years of practicing, I've never seen a list of restrictions placed onto someone that was like so onerous and so over the top. Like, it is clearly a unique condition that they have applied to this specific circumstance for the purposes of
frightening him.
Yeah, putting the fear of God
frightening him and others like him.
Yeah.
I think
so. Yeah, it's very fucked.
Tie all this up in a little bow. I think there's a difference between the freedom of speech we're talking about now and responsible media reporting, which is what we were talking about before with the pandemic and vaccine news and all that kind of stuff, where the media should be free to publish stuff without the risk of prosecution, but there should also be an encumbrance upon the media to report things that are in the national interest with context, as opposed to just trying to get clicks.
I think it's fair.
And then there is another
to have a responsible back and forth between media and government, where you say, "Hey, this was reported inaccurately," and you print a retraction. Like, that's how it's been done for generations. I think that's totally fair.
The thing with this, just to finish off, is that is Friendlyjordies news media? I'd argue not. He's a comedian, so
mate,
really,
he's got 500,000 subscribers. He gets as much attention as Sky News. You know what I mean? Like, at a certain point, you reach a scale.
That's concerning.
21st century media, he is media, right? Like, podcasts are media. YouTube is media. Like,
is he burdened by the same responsibilities of having to think through his content for the social impacts of it?
I think it's a sliding scale.
The ABCs.
It's a sliding scale. When you are at our level, where you have 100 listeners and there's like really fucking nobody paying attention, right? The impacts of defamation would be less, like from a legal context, right? And that's part of the matrix that they use to assess those kind. Like, if someone said to us like, "Oh, you defamed me on your show," part of the impact would be assessed, right? Like, okay, it goes out to 100 people. Was your reputation inherently damaged with these 100 people that listen to the show? How much is that worth? Like, that would be taken into account as part of that process.
By $10.
Right. So here is your $10. Your reputation has been irreparably damaged with the 5 people that listen to the show. You get $2 a piece. Here is your $10. There is a sliding scale, and it is a confusing thing in the 21st century media environment to delineate who is a news content creator and who's a satirist, who's a comedian. Because like, your average person who just tweets a bunch of bullshit at Q&A on Twitter, who has 10 followers, is not a media outlet, right? No. But if you're Vox and you have 1.4 million, like if you've grown to that size, then obviously you are closer to a media outlet than you were before. So it is a kind of sliding scale depending on how much attention you garner, what kind of content you create, the context in which that's interpreted all sort of feeds in. Like, a comedian should not be held to the same set of standards as news journalism.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. Is where if he's trying to make jokes for the point of satire, is that the same as the ABC reporting on John Barilalo potentially killing koalas or whatever the fuck? I actually don't know what he did, but like allegedly, whatever he's done.
Just whacking allegedly on that, just in case.
Yeah.
Whatever he's done, like, is that the same thing? But I think, yeah, you probably.
It's not quite the same thing, but
the internet age makes it different. If you were just in a comedy club in North Melbourne doing an open mic to 20 people, and you could talk mad shit about the Deputy Premier, and there would be no consequences whatsoever. Right?
Williams used to like destroy President Bush, and that's in like, you know, on DVDs, it was in live theaters, you know, like, is that?
Yeah, I mean, look at Lenny Bruce, look at George Carlin. They've all said extremely incendiary things about political figures. The problem with the 21st century is that there's not an easy way to delineate between what's comedy and what's news content, what makes you a publisher versus just a person with attention on a platform. Like, it muddies the waters to a significant degree. But when you're a person who's got hundreds of thousands of subscribers, then obviously you are more institutional than us, who are just sitting here in our second bedrooms, you know, recording content for the internet that very few people will listen to. Like, there is a difference, but it's hard to say when one becomes the other, right?
Home office. Thank you very much, George.
Home office, excuse me. That's why I can see the coat hanger hanging off your cupboard back there, because it's a home office.
I too am in my home office with my hoverboard, Thor's hammer, and my rainbow unicorn PC next to me.
Funny story.
Very profesh.
I also have a Thor's hammer, so we need to get one for Adam as well to complete the circle.
Yeah. By the power of Grey Skull. Wait.
we did have another story, but I think we probably dragged on a little bit too long.
We've done an hour and 20, so probably forget it. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that are ruining the world, that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. You can follow me on Twitter at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me on Instagram at AC Dream.
And if you haven't already done so, it'd be really cool if you could rate our show on your podcast catcher of choice. Helps people find the show, and maybe share it with someone who you think would get something out of it, because we really need to get beyond those 100 people so we can be sued by our own respective Deputy Premier.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.
I mean, it's kind of a compliment in some ways. If you're at a point where you can get information, it's like, oh, okay.
You're doing okay.
What I'm saying.
You're doing okay. Here's a lawsuit.
But I guess we'll never get there because, you know, I kind of like our Deputy Premier. He seems cool.
He's all right. That Michael O'Brien dude, though. Oh.